Hi, and welcome again to my new tutorial. Today I'd like to show you how to change the front of a dress. I bought this one quite a while ago. It's quite fancy, made on the arms, and I really like it. But I really never liked the front of it, because I like to wear some nice jewelry on the skin and not on top of the dress. So what I'll show you today, I will do the cut out of this stretch much deeper, approximately 10 centimeters I got planned. So here we go, let's do it. The first job we have to do is to take the facing off. As you will see on your dress, wherever you do it, you do have a shoulder seam, then comes the actual facing here, and here's the other shoulder part. You will have to take this really carefully off. Do not unnecessarily stretch the material. Don't think to make it easy on yourself and just wanting to cut it off. No, really, stitch by stitch, take it completely out, that it's nice and clean and tidy. My facing piece is totally out now, and we don't need this anymore. I can put this away. And you can see I've undone this a little bit more because I need this for adding the next piece on. I also opened this shoulder part from the actual dress a little bit, the same exactly on the other side. From the factory there was a quite uneven seam inside here, but small. It was between 3 and 6 millimeters, not so well done, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to cut this off anyway. The next step, you have to do a pattern for yourself, which I've prepared here already. I used thin cardboard to do this, that I can bend over, that I can easily work with. What you need is the bottom part of your cutout. This can go away at the moment. Of course, it's your decision if you want a round neck to do, or if you want just a V to do. Any kind of decision on that is yours, it's your design. Now you have to place this exactly from shoulder to shoulder, this pattern, and measure again that you will be exactly in the middle. Then you take your chalk, your tailor's chalk or whatever you have, or in my case I just take a pen, because a pencil, because the white tailor's chalk I wouldn't see on this material. And I made, or I'm going to make, all the way along little black dots, exactly the way I want to cut this out. I've done this already on this side. As I mentioned before, I wanted approximately 10 centimeters lower, but I only do my points and my pattern on 9.5 centimeters, because I will need a 0.5 centimeter seam down here. This I have to consider before I do this cutting. As well, for this we need a new facing piece, as we can't use this one. As you can see, this wouldn't fit whatsoever. It has a total different form. So I prepared some material. As I bought this dress, I do not have the original material, but I found a little leftover from something else, which is quite a strong material. So because of that, I do not need to put an interfacing on the back on. I can use it exactly as it is. And I will use again this pattern where I draw my new curve on here. You halve this, and the material you also put in the edge here in half, and you put this pattern on and draw all the way along here, as I did. I didn't do a pattern right away the complete size. That's why I'm just taking now my measurement, and I draw all the way around from this edge where I'm going to be cutting, a 4.5 centimeter point I put everywhere, all the way around, because that's exactly the width I'm going to cut this particular facing. And that's what I'm going to do now. In my facing and in the dress, I did make a little cut right in the middle. Then I take some pins. Of course, you have the right side lying on the right side as you will stitch it together, and I pinned 2 pins in the first part that I will be stitching. As I cut my part a little bit longer than the dress, I let this stand over at this moment, and now I just stitch it in the width of my foot, which is 5 millimeters, onto my dress, because that was the allowance I left on when I did the cutting. Make sure not to stretch it. Let it run into the machine as a machine wants to take it. Do not stitch over the needles that you might have put in. Pull them out before you go over them, because you do not want to injure your needle from the sewing machine. Now I'm getting towards the middle of the dress and my facing that I got on, and also there I pull the needle out before I get there. As I'm quite firm with the stitching, I don't need to put any more needles in. As you can see, I just carefully go along. Do it bit by bit. This is no problem. Look sometimes towards the end to make sure that you're even with the materials that you cut. And as I said before, try not to stretch this out, as this is round cut that's easily done otherwise. But if you just let the machine take the material in, this will be no problem. And think about the widths that you cut on. In my case, 5 millimeters, and I just stitch this on all the way to the end. I just checked again to make sure I'm correctly at the end there, and now it's stitched on. You see it's lying nice and flat. That's how it will be at the end. Now I take the scissors, because the round part, it's always better to do a little cut-ins all the way along where the round part is. But I only cut it in on my facing, not on the main material, because that otherwise might show through when the material is slightly looking through, like mine is in this case. Now I stitch on the facing, and the seam underneath is also lying towards the facing, not towards the dress. And I stitch this down 1 millimeter width, because that holds it down firm, no matter if I want to leave it without any stitching on the front, or if later on I might stitch it all the way through. Also there, do not pull the material, lay it slightly around as the neck is cut, and let it slowly be taken in by the machine, by your transport of the machine. So I nicely stitch all the way to the end, all the way through. Make sure underneath there is no other parts of the dress that you would be stitching over. One more checking always is not the problem. Be sure to just stitch what you had planned to do. And now when you turn this over, you can see already that just by stitching against this on the facing part, that it nicely lays flat. As we're finished with the front facing, we have to stitch some of the facing on the back on, because we had to open this to be able to take the front part out. So this is only a couple of centimeters on each side, but we got to do it. So you just put it under your machine, look in which width it was stitched on before, as you can still see that, and just stitch it on. And also here you again stitch it down with the seam light towards the facing that was left on, and you just stitch it down as well. And now there is this little shoulder part still open, which we opened up earlier on as well. So that we're just going to put also together, go into the seam that is still there from the shoulder, and stitch the little leftover again together. All the way out to the end, of course. That is not a question. do a good big back and forward stitching so it will not open up later for you. Here you see, you turn it towards the left, and now you have your seams inside to fasten them together later, because then it stays in that position. We got the other side to do the same. First you take the little facing from the back part, lie it all evenly on the edges, and stitch it in the widths as you've seen before, as it was before you opened up the dress. And also here we will stitch again on the facing with the seam underneath lying against the facing. We stitch it down and we put the parts together and close the shoulder part in one go now. When you start the sewing, think about the widths again, that the actual shoulder was stitched, as you got to do exactly the same widths on this particular seam as well. Try to get it all even on every edge, then you're working perfectly. Also here you can see it's easy now to just fold it over and stitch the two seams in the back together to hold it down. But before we do this, I will add something little onto the inside part, as in another tutorial I want to show something else to you, which I'm not going to explain right now. It doesn't matter. I'm taking two little pieces of holders, which I just stitch onto the inner facing part, directly onto the shoulder on. I stitch this with 3 stitches down. That means when I got this all on in these 3 positions, I cut the ending off and I have 2 little loops there. That's for something else, for another tutorial, you will see. I have to do the same thing on the other side, otherwise this would be very one-sided, which I don't want. I just go on with a machine on top of my seam from the facing parts. I take this little loop that I prepared earlier on, and again there I stitch it firmly on flat, that I will have 2 little loops right there. Cut the end off and I got my little loops. Now I have to fasten this in the back, as these 2 seams, if you work correctly, should fit exactly on top of each other. Make sure only to grab when you stitch it down now really only the seam parts, otherwise you will see it on the outer side of the dress then, which you of course don't want. Do it on both sides. Otherwise, this facing piece would immediately slip out when you put the dress on. Yeah, sometimes I fall over my own tongue, talking your language and not my language. As you can see, now our whole front is totally finished. Perfectly. So this is the result of my new dress. I cut it much lower, as you can see. I'm 10 centimeters lower. What I didn't show you on the sewing machine are also once more stitched over all the way through, because that really holds it down well without the facing always keep coming out again. And now I got the dress more or less the way I wanted it from the very beginning. Come around again. Keep watching my tutorials. Bye.